Did you see the new Avengers film?
I actually have yet to see the new Avengers film, but do you read comics? What else you got? I'm not going to ask you how tour was. I'm not going to ask you about making your record, but I have one songwriting question. I am not a person who ever can really write conceptually in the way that something like I Am Gemini is, like writing with characters, writing with different voices, writing with something that follows some narrative or like a plot line. Even when I consciously try to do that, it's almost like the stamina, the staying power isn't there, and I find myself lapsing from it. Is that like plotted out way before? Or is that like, oh, I think these 3 songs I just wrote kind of have a relationship?
Well, this last album was a unique album that it actually was plotted out prior. Mm-hmm. That's the first time I've ever done that much plotting. I've done some plotting in the past, but I'm a huge believer in writing from your own experience as well.
Like
and
blending,
so I'm almost always first person as well.
Sure.
I've been fielding a lot of questions on this record where people are, because it comes off as being third person or omniscient,
right?
That then people are like, this seems like, for what people are used to from you, this seems kind of maybe a little bit distant. Like you're not writing about yourself. The thing is that I think it's just a matter of like developing new ways to write, to kind of go at the same things.
Right.
So I always respond that it is very personal to me, and I simply switch the I's to he's. I simply switch from first to third, so I could tell a story that seemed like it was arm's length from me, but really like the twin brothers are just 2 sides of myself in the story.
Right.
And I made sure that each song and the content of which it was about was actually very personal to me, because if it wasn't going to be, then I was worried that
it was gonna
whatever like universal like concept that I'm hoping will resonate with people, like wouldn't be there if I couldn't put something of myself into it.
Right.
So I know exactly what you mean.
Yep. In college, I did creative writing as a minor, and I just felt like when I wasn't writing poetry or songwriting, whatever you want to call it, or journalism, I can do too. But when I was writing short stories or bordering on longer fiction, it was whatever I had just read, and that was the voice that was coming out of my mouth.
Oh, yeah. No, you get past that, though.
Yeah?
I think it's just practice. You have to, it's like, I'm coming because I do write a lot, and I know exactly what you mean.
You write fiction, like prose writing as well, like that?
And absolutely. There's a point, in my opinion, and I assume that you would do just as you would get past that as well. And I think you just kind of keep practicing at it, and you kind of bully those voices out of your head until you finally get to a point of like, oh, I kind of feel relaxed now. Now I feel like I'm just kind of writing, my own voice.
Yeah. But then I also feel like even when I've written songs that had nothing to do with me, they always have something to do with you. I don't know. I ultimately feel like because it's coming through your prism, if you made the choice to have some sort of distance from it in its articulation, that's still a choice that's coming from you. So it's coming through some kind of filter that's yours. It's not like it just happens divinely and like it's like.
So I imagine that on your last album, though, there must be some overarching
There's
like
themes, I guess. I mean, I feel like all of the records are to some extent about experiences of personhood, like what it's like to be a person, and it was like what it's like to be a person at 22, at 26, at 29, at 32, and that's a super subjective and limit, what it's like to be a person as viewed through what your experience is as a person. And sometimes the songs are more social, and sometimes they're more, I feel like they're ultimately all about the same questions about sex and love and drugs and family and death and then the more mundane aspects of going through your day, and that's enough to write about. I could be writing those stories or songs or reflections or whatever forever because it's fucking always happening.
I've felt that by throwing the fact that we're always aging into the equation, like adding that into like your personal experience, that affords one the right to write about the same subjects again. And I've thought that, and I feel completely comfortable about it. Like where if I'm gonna like come back to like whatever aspects of love or sexuality and songwriting, it's like, well, yeah, but this might be similar to an album I've written, but I wrote that like 10 years ago.
Sure.
And I have a completely different point of view about it now. I have some completely different things I want to say. I mean, if you don't have a different point of view, then
because you're out, you're tapped, and you're like,
well, yeah. See, that would be the problem.
Yeah. Which I don't feel that way.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
I'm just saying, like I've not discouraged myself from like rewriting certain things because I'm like, well, no, you have like a totally different take on it now. Like you should just do it, just write it.
Yeah.
So if lyrics, you know, maybe kind of like evolve in some ways, but also kind of maybe recycle upon themselves as you have more to say on similar subjects. Musically, that's tricky because I think in music you can like find redundancy like a lot quicker.
Yeah.
You know, for Cursive and having 7 albums now, there's this interest to like kind of be like, well, which one does this reflect the most? And I think that makes sense to kind of like look at one's catalog and kind of see like where
the relationships lie.
But I mean, our hope is that it's like that's going to be not that easy of a question. You know, like hopefully it won't be too easy to figure that out because we try to just make sure it doesn't feel too much like anything. I certainly don't want to rehash. This last album, it was like, we're doing hard rock, and it was like, you know.
Yeah, right.
So it seemed easy to be like, well, maybe it's just Domestica then, you know.
But it's not.
But it's really not. I mean, I hope that it's not. I haven't gotten that yet, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to like approach an album being like, I'm gonna do something like the album I did, you know.
No.
But that's kind of is like that's all that question, and I do think a lot of bands do that.
Oh, I think
there's
so
a very
too.
There's a very common approach to be like, let's go back to the roots, which is basically saying like, let's kind of do an album, kind of like our first album,
yeah.
which maybe was like the big album or whatever.
And know? I think that going back to the roots, however deep into your career, is a really different experience and vitality as compared to what made that first album, if it had some sort of magic about it, what it was. You can't just like, I don't know. It's that whole thing. You have your whole life to write the first record, and then however much time to write in between. I try to not get too choked up about. I mean, sometimes the A minor resolves itself really nicely into a C, and if that's the right thing to happen in a song, there are a million other ways to make a song not immediately reflective of every other song that has an A minor and a C chord in it, or even stylistically, like, oh, this is a song that's kind of like a power pop song, or this is a song that's kind of a little punkier, or this is a song that's got a little more of a folk. Whatever the thing is, I think for me it's trying to figure out ways to keep it fresh and exciting, and that there's enough things you can do with music to feel that way without being self-conscious and obvious. Not obvious in terms of the choices, but obvious in terms of like, now I'm gonna spice it up, and this is a merengue version of a Kevin Devine song. You know, like that's a little, but certain things take you certain directions, and I think I feel like I've had feedback from people outside that were kind of like more like, oh, I wish that Brothers Blood was all like that, or I wish that this record was all like, meaning one sort of stylistic wheelhouse or another. And to me, it's like that if I write 15 songs and half of them feel like folkier and half of them feel like a Crazy Horse record or something, or some of them sound like a Superchunk song or whatever, like there's no reason that can all live on one, 90s rock. There's no reason why they can't all live on one album.
Yeah.
To me it felt right, and that's all you can ultimately, you have to answer to that, I guess. But I certainly don't feel like, those things don't make me feel like I wish the records were executed differently. It actually reinforces to me that I just shouldn't be paying attention to what other people think.
Yeah, that really makes sense.
You know? But in terms of the actual construction, I don't know. There are X amount of chords, and there's voicings, and there's different ways to play them, and there's different ways to dress them, and there's different melodies to put over them, and different words to say. I don't know. I feel like at a certain point, I don't feel like I've been totally repeating myself over and over again. And I'll find out, I think, if I do. But
I think it comes down to like the songwriter and how they feel about it. I feel like I personally am not very interested in, for just musically speaking, I'm less interested in revisiting musical ideas. But I think it's very acceptable to do it as well. I think I was even like kind of back to like backpedal from kind of joking about bands that go back to their roots or just playing their first album. It's like, well, really, I mean, if you're, really, if you have, really musically prone in that sense, why not? Like, why can't you, similar to lyrics, why can't you look back at like the 3-chord punk rock that you played on your first album and be like, I feel like I can do it better, or like like I have new insight in how I want to do that.
Or I could do it different.
Then do it. Then do it. You can't really say it's wrong.
No, I mean there is no wrong in that sense, but there's wrong for you.
It's not something it wouldn't be my preference. The only thing I'd say I'm guilty of is like my like total like interest / passion for like like Simon and Garfunkel folk music, and like I'll always have an interest in kind of like dabbling in that.
But that's almost,
but that's like this Americana that I just kind of can't really like.
There's something.
I never really like. I don't ever really want to like sever that tie,
And I think that speaks to, that kind of connects to the earlier question as well, because I feel similarly about that. Even though it's not how I want every song to be, or every record to be, or even every song that starts like that, I don't necessarily want it to finish like that. It can become a lot of songs that I've written on an acoustic guitar that sound like Bleecker Street or something like that by them end up sounding nothing like that by the time you put a whole bunch of other shit in there. But I feel like, to me, that's the same way I feel when that's a song. And if someone gets up and plays a great song that way, I'm always going to be like, I also will be partial to somebody who's doing something a lot more formally revolutionary or something too, but someone who can get up and put 3 or 4 nice chords together and sing something that I can't predict the end of every line or whatever, I'm like, oh shit, that's cool. And I'll always kind of be a sucker for that.
I think that was pretty much perfect, guys.
Great.
Yeah, all right.
That's a wrap.